Hello, my name is Alison Hirukawa. I beat the often path by accelerating the pace of discovery, not with robotics or conventional automation, but by taking a highly scalable existing platform, a printed circuit board, and using that to accelerate gene editing.
Alison Hirukawa, PhD, is the co-founder and CEO of DropGenie. DropGenie is a groundbreaking startup in the tech biospace, making gene editing cheaper and lowering the amount of donor cells required. Doesn't sound like a big deal maybe, but it's huge. They've made a little plastic tray not much larger than the size of a playing card that makes molecular surgery affordable and scalable. Now, the card itself looks something like a maze or a Pac-Man game, where a single droplet can be moved from one square to another. Looks like a video game, but it's real life via a revolutionary system of electric gates, which can be controlled by a computer and automated, etc., which means that they can miniaturize experiments in a way that was never before thought possible, using way less input material, aka donor material, down to a single droplet scale. This is truly at the very cutting edge of technology that will soon impact us all, as gene editing has the ability to cure a range of genetic diseases by directly manipulating our DNA. I can't tell you how excited I am about this episode. Soon, this tech just might improve all of our lives. So here right now is Alison Hirukawa. I am Ross Palmer, and this is Beat the Often Path. Okay, these are things that I understand a lot about. You're talking to the world's foremost authority in all of the stuff that you just said. So I'm going to be very skeptical of all of the claims that you're about to make. But before we begin, quick question. Would you say that you operate in biotech or tech bio? I have recently learned that there's apparently a difference.
I think we consider ourselves tech bio, mostly because when people think of conventional biotech, they are developing an asset. We are not asset builders. We enable drug hunters to discover things. So we're tool builders. So we put the tech before the bio, but I'd say everyone in our team in spirit is half engineer, half biologist, some kind of like mix of those in between.
How awesome is that?
It's great. It's a great place to live.
Yeah. How long have you been an entrepreneur? Is this something new for you, or have you always been thinking that way?
So in terms of like actually being a legitimate entrepreneur, card-carrying entrepreneur, we started the company 5 years ago. But thinking about have you always been that way, that totally resonates with me, because I do think there's this like spirit and sort of a need that isn't necessarily maybe in all of us, or not necessarily in us unless we find the right problem we want to solve. So I do feel like that pre-existed actually starting the company, but a card-carrying founder for 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
You didn't have a lemonade stand when you were a kid?
Oh my God. Actually, now that you say
Selling
that.
candy bars for coin? Okay.
Good, funny story. So when I was about 9, my sister and I tried to start this like neighborhood natural cosmetics company.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and it even had a name. And my sister, who's like an incredible artist, designed the logo, and it was called Epona. And I would like.
So you like Zelda, The Legend of Zelda?
Yeah. Well, I didn't even know about it. It was like I was obsessed with. No, at that time I think I was 9, and I was obsessed with. I wasn't in the video game world. I was more in the like Gaelic mythology world, and Epona is like the goddess of horses or something. And basically, we would like go online with our like dial-up internet, download all these like recipes, print them off, and then like raid my parents' kitchen, and we would like create this little chemistry lab and make all of these products. I don't think we sold one thing, but we had a lot of fun. So we did have, I guess very early on, there were these sort of like aspirations to build something, and not just like one thing, but like a system, I guess, like and do all that stuff. So yeah, we did try that a long time ago.
I think that's typical 9-year-old behavior. I think when I was 9, I was just trying to see how hard I could hit my head with a hammer before I went unconscious. That's pros and cons.
Definitely.
But okay, so the seed was there of something, because that's pretty wild. It seems like you're pretty ahead of the curve there. All right, so in a nutshell, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And what is the significance of solving this? Because I've seen the video, and the video looks wild.
Yeah. So essentially, what we're trying to do is to accelerate the discovery and production of what are called personalized cell therapies for everybody, for you, for me, for everybody out there. So the way to do this is really to bring the cost and scale. So bring costs down, increase the scale of being able to discover and eventually manufacture these types of living therapies. So it's another way to think about it. So I say accelerating the pace of discovery because like there's a lot of, there's hundreds of gene editing biotech companies out there, but 85% of them are preclinical. So there's still a lot of discovery we need to do, things we need to understand. And so we want to facilitate those sort of early research stage and then hopefully bring those home so all of society can benefit.
That's amazing. And are we talking about stuff like CRISPR and these types of technologies?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So CRISPR is probably the stormed on the scene just over a decade ago and is probably going to have a couple of FDA approved therapies. People are hotly anticipating not FDA approval, but regulatory health approval of some CRISPR-based therapies, maybe even in 2023. So can you imagine in a decade something that was discovered in bacteria has come in and just completely changed how we think about how we could treat diseases that were previously thought to be incurable.
Yeah. What do you think the best case scenario is? What types of diseases do you think we might be able to eradicate? I know there are some very specific ones that they're starting with.
Yeah, so I think the low-hanging fruit has been diseases where there is, one genetic alteration that you can come in and kind of play with. The truth is, a lot of genetic diseases are much more complex in their genetics, and it's not just about tweaking one thing or two things. And not only that, diseases look very different in different people. So the low-hanging fruit, what people have gone after, and they've shown tremendous efficacy, have been, places where we've been able to play with, one or two things. The reality is indications are a lot more complex than that, and so it's desire for the ability to iterate quickly and prototype is only going to grow. And that's where our product comes in because we can start to help facilitate that in a cost-effective way.
How cool is that? So we're talking about, I think it's like sickle cell anemia, like certain things like that. These are the ones that are maybe the first ones to go after.
Yep. So some diffuse B-cell lymphomas, that's sort of one of the most famous ones. Chimera, for cancer. There's been some tremendous waves made in immune-oncology, but yeah, you brought up another huge one, which is sickle cell anemia, and there have been some really positive results from clinical trials that have just been, incredibly promising to actually have a therapy that's actually curative, not just treating the patient.
It's truly what we think of when we think of the best part of the future. It's wild to think about the implications of this stuff.
Yeah.
So the person who introduced us, who was, as of this now, a couple episodes back, Sridhar, very amazing person. Now, he was telling me that a lot of the industry that you're in revolves around moving tiny amounts of liquid around, which is something that I think almost nobody, I certainly didn't know that before, and almost nobody knows because who does? This is cutting edge stuff. So what is the significance of moving tiny amounts of liquid around in a controlled manner?
Yeah, so if you think about, in biology, we call that usually a wet lab. And that kind of also denotes the fact that you're working with a lot of liquids in solutions of various temperatures. So you can draw a lot of parallels between cooking or following a recipe and following various protocols, albeit with, more stringent, biological safety conditions and stuff. So at the heart of it, when you are doing a lot of experiments or you're doing workflows like cell line engineering, you are, in a very crude way, doing a lot of liquid handling or liquid manipulation. Facilitating that on a miniaturized scale, which is what our technology helps as part of what our technology helps you do, is actually quite challenging. Most people have looked to robotics and liquid handlers, things that are working at just sort of like another sort of volume and level to enable a lot of that work. And it's been great. But if you want to start to prototype quickly and there isn't a need to work with such large volumes, you can actually really accelerate the pace of what you're working with and cut down costs through the miniaturization. So it sounds kind of simple, but it's really what we've built is partly a liquid handler and dispenser that works at pretty small volumes very robustly, but we also couple that with a way to deliver payloads into cells to enable the editing. So if our product is basically this cartridge, and we've started to layer all sorts of operations involving liquid that are really important to enabling a cell line to be engineered.
And for the people who are not watching, it is roughly the size, a little bit bigger than a playing card, but if you think of a playing card, you're not far off. Somewhere between a playing card and a greeting card is the size of what you're showing. Yeah. I was trying to think, there's got to be something that size. I don't know. Half of a big chocolate bar? I'm not quite sure. But so when we talk about these I would think of a droplet or something like that. Is that a technical term? Is a droplet the smallest possible scale in this case? Or
Yeah. I think we basically create and send out little droplets on our device with a very, very precise volume. And there's lots of ways you can make a droplet. We actually use something called electrostatic force. We don't have pumps or channels. We apply voltages to our consumable, and that allows us to kind of pinch off droplets and move them around. That's why we're called DropGenie, because it looks magical when the droplets float around. It looks like a video game,
except it's real.
It's like a little Pac-Man. That's what my sister says.
And I learned yesterday that the words are hydrophobic and hydrophilic, and that you're gating between hydrophobic and hydrophilic, and that is pushing the droplet from one area into another. And the result is that it looks like it's Pac-Man moving around a grid.
It does look like a little Pac-Man, yes.
Which is just absurd. So that begs the question, how the heck did you come up with this? Or what was the journey that led to this breakthrough or this development?
Yeah, so, we can't, in science...
No, in detail, please. And if you have any patents, can you just write them down on the screen?
Yes, application
all of
number
the most
63.
secret, the podcast wants to know.
So, like anybody in technology or working in engineering and science, you're always standing on the shoulders of giants. So the fundamental technology, the name that it has is called digital microfluidics, and we are not the inventors of that. That distinction goes to some, depending on who you talk to, there's a few folks that had the idea and developed it actually almost 20 years ago, maybe longer. And so I think what's unique, though, is in the past that people were leveraging this kind of technology for pure chemistry applications or diagnostics. So you think about it like it's really useful to move little drops of liquid if you're doing a diagnostic, because you can take like a complex procedure that you typically have to use lots of machines for, put it on a cartridge. You don't need a lot of, sample in some cases, and then you get your answer in a cost-effective way. What we did that was different is that we thought about using this technology with live cells. So why just stop at enabling chemical reactions? Why not think about how we could use this to work with a living cell?
So what might, you mentioned it's like cooking, so it's like one part this, two parts that, right? So what kind of combinations might be occurring? Like a bit of human blood, or like what might be going together, and how would that work?
So on our system, basically we want, the goal of this is to help to create an engineered cell line. So what goes on the system is a cell from a donor, a group of cells from a donor. So it can be immune cells, so that would have been extracted from the blood. It can be iPS cells, it can be stem cell populations, but we really specialize in working with stuff that's difficult to edit or you just don't have a lot of. That's because we're miniaturizing. So that goes on the device. So that's like ingredient one. The other ingredient is what you want to deliver into the cells to enable the edit. So if you think about it, you can add things into genomes, you could take things away, you can do both. You need to have that, we call it, let's say, a payload that needs to be put in. So that's also another ingredient that has to be included on the chip or added to the chip. And then finally, we have buffers that help this whole process to work. So the cells need to be in like an aqueous environment. So they're inside of a droplet. The reagents we work with, we actually deposit them, we print them on our consumable itself, and then the droplet picks it up. But that ends up being in a droplet too. And then we have these conductive solutions that help to push those payloads into the cells when it's time.
So depending on what you're trying to do, you would engineer a different version of this.
So the cartridge is the beautiful thing is the cartridge never changes. You can use software to script essentially the changes that you want to see in terms of movement and electrical parameters. So it's all like coding. If you know Python, you can like play with we have a non-coding friendly GUI as well, but you can actually use codes to script what's going on the consumable. So what only changes is really your input, and that's nice from a business model standpoint because then you can like mass manufacture the cartridge. You don't have to do redesigns, and you can just use the software to change how you move things and what you do, and then also just your ingredients change, just like when you're cooking something in the kitchen.
It's just wild. All of that sounds like words that I think I understood. But at the end of the day, it's just absurd to consider. And of course, I can't even begin to understand the implications of it, but clearly it's significant. So how does one get here? Did you go to school studying something along these lines between being 9 and now?
Great question. So I am a technical person at heart. I'm a scientist. I have a PhD in biochemistry. But my journey to building this was not as an engineer, but actually as the customer or application or person with the pain point. And I actually think that I would love to see more engineering type products where the person that is experiencing the pain points has more of a hand in the design and conceptualization of the final product, because you don't get as carried away with the technology. You just want to solve your problem, and then you search for the most effective way to do it. So in a nutshell, my background is a PhD in biochemistry. My drive is just really my curiosity. So I'm really interested in genomics, genetics, understanding what makes people different, what makes, what drives different types of, indications. And I just, really felt like there was a lack of automation tools and, platforms that would help drug hunters and scientists and people that want to do the discovery. Like, we're missing those kinds of high throughput generalizable automation in our arsenal to actually let us unlock all these questions. So I really came from the angle of like, I really want to do this stuff. It's not feasible today. Who could I work with? What could we do to build that thing to make those dreams come true? So that's kind of where it came from. So this is a spin out of a university, and my co-founders were working on the fundamental technology, but I spent years, before transitioning more into like a customer facing role, where an application role, actually building the tech itself. So I got a crash course in printed circuit boards and doing a lot of this stuff. So yeah, it's kind of how I.
What a cool story! It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So 5 years ago, you got your official founder card.
Whatever that means.
They sent it in the mail. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's official. So were you always considering that you would build a company around this, or is it because you could have gone, let's say, the academic road as well?
Yeah. So actually, the founding story is that after I finished my PhD, I was not working on engineering stuff at all. Again, I was working in the epigenomics space. I was really interested in like what's the contribution of how DNA is configured in like a like physical way, like in a 3D conformation, how that affects our genome. So nothing to do with the actual like tool building, but more just still trying to understand like the world around us and diseases. What ended up happening was I was, interviewing for jobs, but nothing really felt right. Like I looked at management consulting and pharma, and I just didn't, it just wasn't. I'm an intuitive person, so there was something that like kind of still kept me like, I wonder if this is really the thing I want to spend my time on, essentially. Like I love discovery, but I just can't help but feel that there there is a space here where we need to start to build things to help us propel discovery. And quite serendipitously, I met my two co-founders shortly after when I was wrapping up my PhD, who were more on the engineering side. And it's with them that we started this company. And so that took if you had told me 5 years ago you will start this like company in the like tech bio space, I would have been like, what? Like what? Microfluidics, what? And so yeah, I guess just being open and being focused on the thing you want to like you really care about and what you want to solve. Sometimes, you can skin a cat many different ways. So it's like sometimes your life and trajectory takes really interesting turns to take you there. And so I would have predicted that 5 years later I'd be sitting with this consumable, which we're deploying with partners now, actually. Yeah.
For the record, you don't have to skin a cat at all.
Yeah, that's really violent.
If you choose not to.
I'm a cat lover, but it's a very, yeah.
Yeah, sure, cat lover. Right. So 5 years on in the journey, how do you feel now? Are you happy with the decision? Do you feel that you have grown or changed in any fundamental way since taking this new adventure on?
Yeah, so I'll use my friend's words that I think she encapsulates it really well. She says, "I'm net happy," and I think it's really really hard to build something from scratch. It's hard too when you're trying to build something for a market that doesn't necessarily quite exist yet, with a technology that was it was coming from academic lab that needs to then be commercialized and work robustly at scale. And so and not to mention all the no's that you're going to get from lots of different stakeholders, right? So it's really hard, and I think it makes you really think about what is important, what you care about, and you really have to be, this is really what I want to spend my time on, because a lot of this it could not sometimes come to fruition, right? So it's like I'm really doing this because I believe in it. So there is a tremendous sense of satisfaction, though, I find personally, in doing that, in doing something I believe in, and building something physical, something real, something where we also see an incredible market opportunity. So, but yeah, it's hard. There's like so many times when your conviction is like dropping, and you're like, oh, like.
That consultant job looks pretty
sweet.
I
was gonna say, it's like what
must be nice.
Yeah, what but it's also, there's nothing quite like just when there's no roadmap, like I think that's something that's really exciting. And that's an opportunity where there's this concept of something called like rookie minds. It's the idea that like if something hasn't been done before, sometimes it's not necessarily someone with a ton of experience that is best suited to be successful in it. It's really someone coming in with like with an open mind. So yeah, so it's a tough path, but overall, I think it's been um, a incredible personal growth opportunity as well. Yeah.
So do you think you've always been introspective? Because I don't think everybody takes a step back and
Mm,
asks themselves, what do I want to spend my life working on? I mean,
mm,
certainly that's not very common.
mm,
How do I spend the few years that I have on this planet? Because many people aren't thinking that big picture of a level
mm,
about their lives. They're thinking, how do I
mm,
get that job? Or I would
mm,
like to just be hired by somebody,
mm,
anybody. And I think very few people, maybe it's insecurity, maybe it's lack of confidence, but maybe it's the fact that it's tough out there for everybody and
mm-hmm,
life is just hard. Have you
mm-hmm.
always been able to see the bigger picture and to sort of take a step back and say, look, I want to be conscious about how I spend my time?
Hmm. Honestly, I don't think I can say. I think I was to an extent, but this has only like been magnified by my experience in the past 5 years. So I think there was like a seed there, but then there was still a lot of like, um, yeah, maybe it was like insecurity or sort of. You can always find a reason not to do something, right? It's the times when it's almost this feeling of like, I have to do this. Like, I just feel this strong conviction. And I believe even when it's like, of course, you need to know when to like stop or step away, but you just feel this, you feel compelled essentially. And I don't think that you necessarily feel like that all the time. It kind of has to build and you kind of have to find the right niche where you're like, yes, this is like, some people might say it's like you feel like a calling or something, but it's really a feeling, and it just feels even when it's really difficult and you definitely does it feel like giving up. You just can get up the next day again, and you're like, you know what? Okay, new day. Let's do this.
Speaking of new days, what is a day in the life like?
hmm. Yeah, never the same.
How many hours do you think you work in a week?
I don't even know. Because, like, do you count, like, the time you're thinking about it? Like, do you count, like, all the friends you hang out with that kind of live in that same space and then you talk shop? Like, where does it begin and where does it end? I think, like, hands on time, try to be really conscious of, like, just my energy going into, yeah, certain aspects of it, but I would say it's not a 9 to 5. Yeah, but it's also like it's something, when you really like something, like you just kind of want to do it. You just you find the energy or you find yourself gravitating toward it. That being said, there's lots of, things that are less fun to deal with, when you're starting and running a company. But I think, yeah, I would just say it's not 9 to 5.
Yeah. As you grow, has your interest increased? Because I'm sure you know a lot more now that you had no idea about when you
Yeah.
first began. Is it still that same thrill or
I think because the game changes so much as the company grows or scales or pivots, that you're never playing the same game. And it doesn't get easier, it doesn't get harder, it just gets different. And so it's like once you've kind of reached this level and then you're like in the know, you're like, oh, level up. You're like, I don't know anything anymore, Ken. Or like, this is a completely different, ballpark. So as long as I think one gets satisfaction in this, like always being a little bit like off center, it's definitely like challenging, but you're never really. Let's just say there's very little, routine. So yeah, the game just always changes. And
do
that's
you,
why I think there's serial entrepreneurs that keep playing because the game is always different.
right?
Yeah.
And obviously, money is not the primary motivator for many people beyond a certain point. For some,
So yeah, it's interesting. I think it's like, I really think it's 50-50 out there, to be honest with you. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like all things, as long as you're like brutally honest with like why you're here and what success looks like to you, like you do you. Honestly, like it's great. In some cases, it would probably be better if some founders were more greedy with their business model for their company. In some cases, it would be better if maybe they were less. But just being honest about that and like I think is important.
Yeah, I just want to distance myself from the rest of humanity as much as possible.
Right.
I
Be on
don't
your little
I don't
cloud.
like people. I just want to get as far away from them as I can. Give me 7 miles of beach in Hawaii. I don't care who I displace or what I have to do.
Some days I feel like that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just go farther and farther away.
Yeah.
What a remarkable story and what a remarkable life that you've led. I know this is sort of taboo to talk about in the startup world, but do you believe that this mission, because, how do I phrase this? When people are working, especially if they are a serial entrepreneur, they are very committed to their project up to the moment that they try to sell it or they get an exit and then they move on to something else. To what degree do you feel that this particular line of work is, let's say, your life's mission, if you could have such a thing, versus I'm just going to build this company to the best place that I can and then maybe sell it and then maybe do something totally different like a lot of people do?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to say when you're not in the moment of the decision. But I think when I think about what I value, like what I care about, and for me, like time is like the most precious currency, right? Like it's the thing it's very hard to buy more of that, right? To an extent you can, but it's
Well, thanks to you, we might be able to.
Well,
if anybody is trying to buy time.
It's the most valuable thing. And so I think there may be moments in a journey where it's like, things have changed in the market, things have done this and that, where this isn't going the place that is in line with my vision. And so, yeah, it's time to realign with that. And that might mean a new chapter, right? So I think as long as I feel connected to what's being built and I have the conviction and I feel like that thing is there, whether it's at DropGenie or it's with something else, I feel like I'll be okay. But as much as the company is a part of all of the founders, it's not everything. And for it to scale, it can't be, right? It needs to live in its own universe and other people come in and grow it too. So I think it's like one piece of the journey into my mission and the things I want to do in my life, and that I'm okay with that.
How cool is that? That's a great answer. It's a very thoughtful answer and very honest. It felt real. It's so awesome. I can't wait to see what happens from this. I will continue to watch you from afar. Can I see this thing?
Yeah. The other thing
not that it does our listeners much good, but I'd like to know a little more.
The other thing that's cool is even though we don't use robotics, we integrate with conventional automation. So we understand that conventional automation doesn't, solve everything, but we know it's an ecosystem that exists. So you can actually put our chip in a module or what they call a work cell and run it. And we have little robot arms that can pull it off and put a new one on. And so, it's a fun little
just wild. Honestly, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time, especially given the circumstances, to come and enlighten me on what is, truly one of the most fascinating frontiers. What if, right?
Yeah.
In 20, 30 years, who knows? And I've heard it said before. I talked to some people from MIT a while back, and, of course, there are some people that believe that all of aging and potentially even death is just the product of several different diseases. Like a car doesn't just break down, something fails. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it is an interesting thought to wonder if you can fix one thing at a time, at what point do you fundamentally change the human lifespan or the human quality of life? As a purely speculative thing, what do you believe that the upper limit of a human lifespan might be? Do you believe that immortality, biological immortality is possible, or 150 years?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it because honestly, I don't really care.
Yeah, why would you?
And you know what? And the reason is because, again, I think it's there's times where years go by and it's kind of not that there's the years blur together, and then there's days where it's those days you remember so much. And so I don't know. I feel like I feel like it's not that it's not an important and interesting question to work on, but it's like, what about, the quality of the time we have? I do work in this because I do think the odds are sometimes not stacked in certain people's favors. And hopefully a technology like this would democratize at least that. It's up to you to live your life in a way that's fulfilling and meaningful to you. But let's at least give you the chance to do that. Whether it's 150 years or 100 years, I don't know if longer is necessarily better. I'm not sure. But I think I guess like, just even like academically, it's an interesting thing to push the limits. More is not always necessarily better.
I've said it before, and I will say it again. I want to go to the dentist and to the DMV 2,000 more times. I want to wait in lines forever.
Exactly.
This life is perfect. I will never, ever, ever get tired of this.
That's what we should be working on. Never having to go to the dentist again. That's the real thing we need to solve.
Right. Yeah. What do you do with 2,000-year-old teeth?
Exactly.
That's what I mean. These are the real questions. You've been incredibly generous with your time. How cool. I hope we can stay in touch. I guess if, do you have any parting words, or where can people support your work? Obviously, the website is drop-genie.com. But yeah, I'll let you wrap this episode up.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I think part of what we're also really interested in our effort to make sure all the right stakeholders are at the table when we're starting to democratize gene editing is to get out there and talk about what this could mean and really have a conversation around this stuff, because it is kind of a new frontier. So definitely find me on LinkedIn, reach out. I would love to have a conversation about this. I think it's something we should be talking about and thinking about with all new technologies. There's a lot of ways things could go, and there's no reason why different citizens can't have a voice in sort of thinking about how these new technologies are leveraged to benefit everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, you strike me as just not a very bright
person. I know. I'm a disappointment.
You're not very thoughtful in general.
I didn't go to MIT. So.
Yeah. I think we're just going to have to cancel this episode. Oops. Oh, the tape wasn't running. Man, it didn't record. Dang it. Well, it's been fun. I'm deeply humbled and blown away. It's been an absolute pleasure. What can I say? How cool. I'm just so excited. Yeah. And with that, the official podcast is over.